Okay, everybody, we're back. I don't know what happened. My computer froze, but I'm glad that I noticed before I got too deep into the video. So, I think I left off talking about Keefe D. That he did play football and he was good at it. And um, he met Suge Knight and they were around 8 years old and they played football together. From the book, I understand that Suge Knight's father was their coach and that Keefe D would spend time at their house eating and swimming in their pool. So they know their relationship goes way back to early childhood. So that makes me wonder, is that partly why Suge did not want to identify Keefe D as being in the car? So and so because he knew him longer, that maybe he was going to be more loyal to Keefe D. But who knows? But Keefe D had an opportunity to play football, and he did go to college, and but he felt like he didn't have the patience to wait to make money. He wanted the money now. And that love of money is what will get you in trouble. So when he found out how easy and how profitable it was to sell cocaine, then he chose that over pursuing the football career. So can you imagine if he had continued with the football career instead? That he probably would, I'm sure he would not be in this position right now. But it's sad also that some of his instructors, one of his instructors in particular, he would the instructor would buy marijuana from him, and then the instructor encouraged him to sell cocaine. And that's kind of where it started, and that is so sad that the people in his life, he didn't have a mentor to encourage him to do things in a more honest way. So yeah, so that's what I've read so far. And also the fact that um a lot of his family members suffered from cancer. I believe it was colon cancer. And some of them have died. And he almost died from cancer. Then he beat it after surgery that saved his life. And now my understanding is that he has cancer again. So I would hope that whether he is found guilty or set free, that he will make the most of the time he has left on this earth to make a difference, to first of all evaluate whether all of that drug selling and stacking money what ended up being worth it in the end. And that, and it kind of reminds me of Tookie Williams. He was also a gang member, and he got the death penalty. And if you know the Tookie Williams story, and if you don't, look that up, because he wrote children's books against joining gangs, and he tried to get the gang members to have peace between them. So it would be so wonderful if Keefe D did something like that, just transformed his life around, gave himself over, really over to Christ Jesus, you know, because even if the you give yourself to Christ, that does not mean that you're not going to suffer the consequences for your choices that you've made. So the Lord can save him right where he's at, but it doesn't mean that he's going to um, win this case. He may still end up in prison, but only the Lord knows. All we can do is pray. So so let's get into this. So it's been almost 30 years after Tupac Shakur was murdered in Las Vegas, and the man accused of orchestrating the killing is finally preparing to stand trial. But who is Keefe D? That's why I'm reading the book, trying to understand who he is and what is it that he said in that book that is incriminating him right now. And why did it take so long? What evidence does the prosecution have? And what will the defense say? Today, we're breaking down everything you need to know before the trial begins. So, talk about the night Tupac was shot. It was September 7th, 1996. Mike Tyson had a fight at the MGM Grand. And then there was a fight between Tupac and Orlando Anderson after the event. And then Tupac was riding in a BMW with Suge Knight. And then he was shot at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Cobalt Lane. And then Tupac died 6 days later on September 13th. So these events are well documented, but the trial is about whether prosecutors can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Keefe D is legally responsible. And Keefe D is a longtime Compton gang member, allegedly. Everything is alleged. And he is the uncle of Orlando Anderson. And he has publicly spoken about the case in interviews and memoirs. He was arrested in 2023, but he has pleaded not guilty. So, the prosecutors, they have to prove that a murder occurred. That's undisputed. We all know Tupac was killed by somebody. And that Keefe D is legally responsible under Nevada law. That's what they have to prove. And that the evidence proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So what will the defense argue? They're likely, so far, they're saying they're trying to have the argument that Keefe D's statements were exaggerated or made for publicity. The case relies too heavily on old statements, is what they're trying to say. The long delay has affected evidence and witness reliability. And the prosecution has not met its burden of proof. That's their argument. Okay. So this trial is going to be on August 10th. And on August 4th, I do believe that they will complete the jury selection. And then the opening statements. Then Keefe D's 2008 interview, they will that's something that you might want to watch. And then his memoir and other public statements, witness testimony, physical and documentary evidence, defense cross-examination. So the trial is set to last about 4 weeks, but I can't imagine it just being solved in 4 weeks. But who knows? But this trial has been anticipated for years and will be here every step of the way. And my goal is to tell you what my goal isn't to tell you what to think. It's to help you understand what happens in court. And we'll separate facts, allegations, and opinions so you can follow the evidence for yourself. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for daily trial coverage. Because I'm about truth, justice, faith, and real talk, okay? So in future episodes, we may want to explore who is Orlando Anderson, who is Suge Knight, the MGM Grand Fight explained, and then the White Cadillac timeline, Keefe D's 2008 interview, Greg Kading's investigation, Russell Poole's theory versus the prosecution's case, how Nevada murder law applies to this case, the jury's biggest questions, and then we're going to be on the lookout for the verdict. So it's a lot. It's a lot. Okay. All right. So be on the lookout. And hold on, I'm checking all my notes. And then of course I'll be reading the book and updating you anything that stands out. Then I wanted to cover, because I was interested in different people that may end up being on the witness stand or being cross-examined. So let me get to that. I was up last night like late, and I just kept thinking of people like, oh, I gotta check out this person, that person. Yeah, let me go to that part. Oh, where is it? If I can't find it right now, that's just fine. Let me see here. Because I had like open that up. And I want to be on the lookout for like is Foxy Brown going to be there? She was named in this trial. Is Mopreme Mopreme. He is Tupac's stepbrother. Seshua, Tupac's biological sister. I do believe she said she planned to attend. Billy Garland, Michael, why am I saying Michael Jackson? Tupac's biological father, Billy Garland, is he planning to attend? To my understanding, from what I looked at last night, I don't think, let's see, that I think I saw something about him saying that he didn't plan on attending the trial. But he may change his mind. And then where is that? I had a whole list of people, and I was like, well, this is a good list of people for us to kind of be watching in these next couple of days. Snoop Dogg. It's the question of, is Snoop Dogg going to be questioned. The Outlaws, that was Tupac's group that he was producing. They were in Vegas that night. Um, the Outlaws, I can't think of their names right now. Napoleon and others, are they going to be there? Are they going to be on the witness stand? Is Suge Knight going to testify? He should. He should be the main person testifying because he knows who the killer is. He knows who the killer is. So it's a matter of, is he going to talk? Okay. And then who else did I think of? Also, Yaki Gaddafi, even though he was murdered, but he saw the killer. He saw the killer. And I believe he was going to talk to law enforcement before he was allegedly murdered. But the people that he talked to, witnesses, the two girls that were in the car driving up next to Tupac and Suge, they were fans and calling his name out. They were right there when the shooting happened. In fact, Keefe D allegedly Keefe D was in the car. They drove past the girls. There's some important witnesses, people that were on the strip that night. Reggie Wright. I would think that Reggie Wright would be testifying. Who else? Sean Puffy Combs. He would be a person of interest, right? And let's see, who else? Oh, that finally found the king. Finally found what I was looking for. So, these are my notes here. These are my notes. This is stuff I was looking up last night. One issue. The family of Orlando Anderson. And of course, he can't speak because he was killed in 1998. But he was bragging about he shot Tupac. And there were 3 other passengers in the car. Now, they're all deceased. But I know that you can't just shoot the biggest rapper of all time and keep your mouth shut without bragging, especially to people you trust or other gang members. So, yeah, here we go. So, Sean Diddy Combs could become an important part of the trial. But it's important to distinguish what has actually happened from allegations, of course. And let's see, a major development did happen this week. I already said that yesterday, that the interviews, the memoirs is going to be allowed as evidence. And then Keefe D's defense has discussed calling Sean Combs as a witness, but reports say the defense views Combs as potentially useful because Keefe D previously made allegations involving Combs and testimony denying those allegations could be used to attack the reliability of Keefe D's older statements. But that does not mean Combs has been charged in Tupac's murder. He has not. And allegations that Combs offered money to have Tupac or Suge Knight killed remain allegations, not established facts. Okay? And let's see. Diddy could take the stand though in the Tupac murder trial, but I don't know how much help he's going to be. He's not going to, for him to admit anything, any involvement, then he'd be implicating himself. So it's probably smarter for him to say, nope, I don't know nothing about it. I didn't have anything to do with it. I don't, just to keep your mouth closed. But I don't think he'd make a good witness on the stand. For some reason, I feel like he's just too reckless with what he says. But Suge Knight is a major figure in this trial, even though the defendant is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, not Suge. But Suge was the one driving with Tupac in the passenger seat. Okay, and when the shooting occurred, he was also injured himself. And then Keefe D obtained the gun and was in the Cadillac with Terrence Brown, DeAndre Smith, and Orlando Anderson, allegedly. So the big question, will Suge testify? That's something worth watching closely for, because Suge he's the only other living eyewitness, and his testimony could be extremely important. So Keefe D's defense has previously expressed interest in getting Suge to testify. But Suge has publicly maintained that he will not testify against Keefe D. And he has disputed parts of the government's theory about who killed Tupac. So a subpoena, whether he could be compelled to appear and exactly what he would say, could become major stories if the issue arises as the trial approaches. I feel like the prosecution, whoever gets to him first, they probably going to offer him a deal in exchange for testifying. So the trial is currently, So then who else? Then Reggie Wright Jr. He was head of security for Death Row. Now, Reggie Wright Jr. could be an important name in the trial, and his role is different from Suge Knight's or Sean Combs. Wright was a former Compton police officer who became involved with Death Row Records security. More importantly, for this case, Wright testified before the Nevada grand jury that indicted Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. Wow. And his testimony included a confrontation at the 1996 Soul Train Awards involving Tupac's group and a group that included Keefe D. So there's another reason to watch him closely. Keefe D's defense has previously advanced an alternative suspect theory involving Reggie Wright Jr. and Death Row security. Wright has denied involvement in Tupac's killing. An accusation by the defense is not evidence that Wright participated in the murder, and he has not been charged in Tupac's killing. Now, my understanding is that Suge Knight also said that Reggie Wright Jr. had something to do with it. So we got to be on the lookout for whether Reggie Wright appears as a trial witness and how much of his grand jury testimony and the defense alternative theory ultimately reaches the jury. And the judge also ruled this week that Keefe D's, like I said, his police interview will be used at trial, making his past statements particularly significant. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do a segment on him. Then Orlando Anderson, he cannot testify, of course, but the prosecution's theory connects the September 7th shooting to what happened earlier that night at the MGM Grand. Tupac, Suge Knight, and others attacked Anderson after the Mike Tyson fight, and prosecutors alleged the shooting that followed was retaliation and that Keefe D helped organize it. And Keefe D is Orlando Anderson's uncle. So one issue I expect to be especially important is who actually fired the shots. Anderson was long suspected of being the gunman, but accounts of who fired from the Cadillac have conflicted Keefe D's own statements. Keefe D's own statements will therefore matter enormously. His 2019 memoir is admissible, and this week the judge also ruled that his recorded interview will be used. So I had that so many times. So, but I have to wonder about how accurate that is, because Orlando was attacked at the MGM by Tupac, and my understanding that his shoulder was dislocated or injured, and I'm not sure if there's any evidence that he got treatment from the hospital, but that would be interesting to look up, whether he was at the hospital at the time of the alleged shooting. And if he wasn't at the hospital and he's injured, how was he able to reach over the other brother that was in the car and shoot that gun? And it was not just one shot. And then Trayvon Lane, you gotta wonder, was he, involved? Because he is very important to the events, because prosecutors say the fight happened because he whispered in Tupac's ear and identified Orlando Anderson as the person that tried to steal his death row chain. He could still be a person of interest, even if he wasn't in the Cadillac accused of carrying the shooters. He was associated with Death Row Circle and Mob Piru. And before the Las Vegas shooting, he had an earlier confrontation with Orlando and some other Southside Crips at Lakewood Mall that involved a death row chain. And then after the Tyson fight, he recognized Orlando at the MGM, and according to Detective Greg Kading, Lane pointed Anderson out as the one involved in the earlier chain incident. So Tupac then attacked Anderson because of that, along with others, including Suge. And I saw Bob James and others that joined in on the fight. Hours later, Tupac was shot. So why Trayvon Lane matters to the trial? Well, the prosecution alleges that Dwayne Keefe D. Davis orchestrated Tupac's killing, and the retaliation theory makes the MGM fight crucial. Davis's nephew Orlando Anderson was among the men Davis said were in the Cadillac. So it'd be interesting to see, like, because the theory I've been hearing is like, why would Trayvon Lane whisper that into Tupac's ear when Tupac had gang members around him to be able to handle that business? Okay. And then, especially them knowing that Orlando was a Crip, was a gang member. Why would you tell Tupac, who was not a gang member, knowing how hot-headed Tupac was? But his testimony, if he's still alive, I haven't seen anything showing that he's deceased, but I do plan to look at some of his YouTube interviews to see what he has to say. But because he should be able to help explain why Tupac confronted Orlando in the first place. But and there's different accounts. Some people say that Trayvon Lane pointed out Orlando and telling people who he was. So, and then Snoop, even though Snoop was not in Vegas, I've heard interviews where people have said that Snoop had a walkie-talkie and he was at whose house? He was with somebody else. His who is that? I can't think of his name. But he I think he does I'm just going blank. But anyway, he was at another person's house that was part of death row and his walkie-talkie, and I think Snoop already knew what was up before it happened, and that was the impression that the other guy got just by his demeanor. But Snoop Dogg is relevant to the Tupac story, but I'm not finding reliable evidence that he is currently a named witness or defendant. So we'll see. Snoop could still come up because he was a major death row artist and had firsthand knowledge of Tupac, Suge Knight, death row, and the tension surrounding Tupac at that time. We should be careful with online claims because that saying that Snoop helped set Tupac up, took money, or participated in the conspiracy, because those claims they've been circulating in other videos and discussions, but the evidence is not 100% reliable and have not been established as facts or showing that prosecutors have charged Snoop in connection with Tupac's murder. So, okay, and then who else? And as far as Tupac's family, so Tupac's family, like I said, Billy Garland, his father, his biological father, may not be there. He said he might not attend, but family members should be separated into those who might have evidence relevant to the criminal case and those whose importance is primarily Tupac's legacy and the family's response to the prosecution. But Billy Garland, his biological father, he has spoken publicly about Keefe D's arrest, but he does not accept the prosecution's case as the complete explanation for his son's death. He has described Keefe D as a pawn and has expressed his belief that there was a larger story behind Tupac's killing. So those are Billy Garland's belief, but they have not been established as facts in the criminal case. But Billy Garland said in 2024 in an interview that he did not plan to attend Keefe D's trial and that a conviction would not give him closure. But the rest of Tupac's family, of course, Afeni Shakur, she died in 2016. So it's sad that she'll never get a chance to see this trial. And then Sekua, Tupac's half sister, she's a family member we should keep an eye on as the trial begins, because she did say a couple of weeks ago that she was going to attend. And Mopreme Shakur, Tupac's stepbrother and fellow rapper, he's another important family voice because he knew Tupac's relationship and circumstances during his lifetime. And then there's Tupac's extended Shakur family, including, of course, Matula Shakur's stepfather. He passed away also. But could Tupac's relatives testify? Potentially, but there's not any reliable current reporting confirming that any of his family will testify. So the case centers more directly on Keefe D's alleged participation and the occupants of the Cadillac in the fight involving Orlando and Keefe D's own statements over the years. So the judge, it's pretty much, that's the biggest part of the case. But I will be tracking to see, if any of these people, those who are still alive, will, what kind of moves they're going to make. And then Yaki Gaddafi or Yafeh Fula and the Outlaws, they're important, particularly because Gaddafi was an eyewitness. But, he was killed, unfortunately. And he said he reported that he could identify the shooter and that he was a witness. And investigators wanted to speak with him, but he died. Isn't that suspicious, right? So he died in November 1996, less than 2 months after Tupac died. And he was only 19 years old. So that created another obstacle for Las Vegas homicide investigators. So he obviously cannot testify. So you got to wonder what he did tell investigators and what investigators did with that information, and could it still become relevant, depending on the evidence and the rulings and the testimony from the surviving investigators and witnesses. And then the outlaws, this is where well, members of Tupac's entourage were in Vegas, and their accounts can help reconstruct the fight, then the convoy afterward, and then the shooting and what happened immediately after. But we have to be careful about, all of this, including claiming that Gaddafi was murdered because he witnessed Tupac's shooting. His deaths, so soon after, it naturally fuels that theory, but the timing alone doesn't establish that his killing was connected to the Tupac murder. But I put a bet on it. Oh, okay. So, but other people to keep an eye out on is Idi Amin, Castro, Napoleon, Young Noble, and Hussein Fatal. Now, sadly, Young Noble committed suicide last year. I think it was last year. So he's no longer with us. Um, so that so we don't know the outlaws, like their locations or what firsthand knowledge that they have, and or what statements, because they all had different statements. So it'd be interesting to see if any of them will be subpoenaed to testify. And then, of course, other witnesses, Michael Moore, who was security, he was Tupac's personal security. But unfortunately, he died allegedly by suicide. And then Michael Moore, former death row security employee, he does have some interviews on YouTube, you know, and it sounds like he's kind of implicating Reggie Wright and Shug a little bit. But again, everything is alleged. But he's interesting because he had personnel concerns that security arrangements surrounding Tupac in Las Vegas, saying that they were instructed not to carry guns. But he, refused to not carry his gun, so he was told to stay at the club then. So, but we can't present claims that Moore witnessed a conspiracy or heard incriminated radio traffic or knew who arranged the shooting as established facts unless those claims are introduced and supported in court. Because there are a lot of conflicting stories about death row security online. Now, he did say that on the radio, he heard somebody say, "Got him." And then somebody said, "Shh, don't talk on the radio." So that was his account. So these are just some people that are connected who are persons of interest. And I do believe that Michael Moore is deceased. And Frank Alexander was his head of security. Well, was his direct security. Gene Dill. Wait a minute. Eugene Dill. He was. I don't think he was ever death row security. I think he was bad boy security. So I don't think he probably has anything to do with it unless he knows something about Diddy's involvement. David Kenner, the attorney, the longtime attorney for death row. It would be interesting to see if he would be of any value. Then George Price and other former death row personnel. He may be useful for at least the background relationships and what was going on. But like I said, it's just going to be very, very interesting just to see what is going to happen. Foxy Brown, the women that Tupac and Suge encountered in the car shortly before the shooting. Yeah, they definitely would. It would be very interesting to hear them, what they have to say, because they were there. They were interacting with Tupac, and they were there when the shooting happened. And then they drove off, and then the Cadillac pulled alongside them. And then the shooting occurred, and then they made a right turn, and the girls made a right turn trying to get out the way. But all they did was get in the way, allegedly. So we just have to be careful also with these women as to whether or not they actually witnessed the shooting, because the women have not said they saw a person. So we still don't know about them, but I think that they're important. Okay, and Kadada, it's another one. Kadada Jones, she's important to Tupac's final day, because although at this point we haven't found any reliable reporting confirming that she is scheduled to testify, but Kidada Jones, the daughter of Quincy Jones, she was Tupac's girlfriend, and I think Beyonce at the time, and she traveled with Tupac to Las Vegas and she was there that day, but she didn't accompany him to the fight. Tupac wanted her to join him later for the party at Club 662. But one detail could be particularly interesting for the trial timeline. Kadada said she packed Tupac's clothes and reached for the bulletproof vest he had been wearing, but Tupac declined to take it because it was too hot to wear. And then after Tupac was shot, Kadada went to the hospital and was there during his final days. So that makes her an important witness to Tupac's state of mind before Las Vegas and what happened with the family afterward. But she wasn't an eyewitness to the shooting itself. But she might, who knows what Tupac could have told her, because he was pretty juiced after that fight with Orlando. Then he went back to the hotel and where she was at. So who knows what they said to each other. And then he changed his mind about her going out to the club because he didn't feel like it was safe. Um, so definitely Kadada Jones would be interesting. Quincy Jones is deceased. Um, think, and I think one of Tupac's cousins that she was with Kadada, but I'm not sure. I don't know if that's absolutely true. So there's a lot. There's a lot of questions. So in the next couple of days, we will be on standby, and I will be preparing for this. Okay, Napoleon. His name is Muta. Um, he was one of the outlaws. He's worth following, but his role is different from Yaki Gaddafi or Idi Amin because his accounts can provide context about Tupac's relationships and the aftermath of the shooting. However, he can't verify from reliable. Um, he can't. He's not a confirmed witness though. And he criticized Keefe D for repeatedly discussing Tupac's killing publicly, while also saying he believed Tupac himself wouldn't have wanted law enforcement involved because of the street culture surrounding the conflict. So Napoleon's opinion about Tupac is not evidence concerning Keefe D's guilt, though. So, but Napoleon's importance is more about his relationship with Tupac and knowledge of the people surrounding him. So, I wouldn't describe Napoleon as an eyewitness to the murder without evidence establishing that. So the trial is still scheduled so far for August the 10th, and I'm hoping that there's no delays or anything because, we want this. We've been waiting for this a long time. Another person is Mob James. He may be significant in this Keefe D case because he says he was in Las Vegas the night Tupac was shot. And he also said that Mob James was part of the Mob Piru and he worked security around Death Row. And he says he was working at Club 662 that night, um, where Tupac and Suge Knight were supposed to be arriving after the Tyson fight. But Mom James has publicly said he saw Keefe D, Orlando Anderson, and other Southside Crips arrive at Club 662 in a white Cadillac that night. So that claim goes directly to a potentially important issue as to whether Keefe D was in Las Vegas and around these men on the night of the shooting. Because now Keefe D is saying he wasn't even in Vegas. So if that is proven to be a lie, then that's going to hurt his case because then you have to assume everything else is a lie. Not about what he said in his book, though, but Mob James has said police question him about the case, but he has also publicly said he doesn't want his information used to put Keefe D away. So we will see We put Mob James high on the trial list to watch for. But I don't know why are these people so loyal to Keefe D. Keefe D. And there's also another person connected to Mob James whom we should cover, and his name is Poochie. Poochie's name appears in a very different theory about Tupac's murder, so we need to separate the allegations about him from the prosecution's case against Keefe D. And then Greg Kading and Russell Poole are two of the most important investigators to understand because they develop very different theories about the Tupac Biggie murders. For the and for the QPD trial, Kading is much more directly connected to the evidence that the prosecution may use. And Greg Kading, he's a former LAPD detective, and he led a task force investigating Biggie's murder, and that investigation eventually led investigators to Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. And then Kading participating in the investigation that obtained Davis's account of the Tupac shooting. And Davis described being in the Cadillac with Orlando and Terrence Brown and DeAndre Smith and discussed how the shooting occurred. And Kading later detailed the investigation in Murder Rap. So you might want to watch that. And also, there's an interview on Vlad TV of Greg Kading and Keefe D. But that connection has become important right now because Kading, he should be high on our trial watch list, even if another investigator authenticates or explains portions of the interviews. Because Kading's investigation and the circumstances under which Davis made his statement could become a major defense battleground. But the defense has an obvious question to pursue. Were Keefe D's statements reliable, voluntary, and corroborated, or was he telling investigators what they wanted to hear because of the circumstances under which he was cooperating? And then Russell Poole, he was an LAPD detective best known for investigating the murder of Christopher Biggie Smalls Wallace. And he developed a theory involving Suge Knight death row connections and allegedly corrupt LAPD officers. And his theory differed substantially from the Southside Crips Keefe D narrative that ultimately became the basis of the current Tupac prosecution. And Poole died in 2015, so he obviously cannot testify. And I think his death was suspicious. But his investigation could still be interesting to look at. And there was also a movie about him, his investigation. I don't know the name of it, but it was a decent movie. Yeah. So, all right. So Kading's theory is that this was a retaliation. Poole's theory is that it was corruption in death row and LAPD. But the jury will decide based on the evidence, okay? So that's all for now. I will keep you updated as the time gets closer. So thank you for watching, and prayers up for all parties involved.